Here's the moment that still makes my stomach drop when I think about it, and I need you to picture it like you were standing beside me on red earth. 200 people in a village square fell silent, while a grown woman grabbed a teenager's clothes and tried to rip away the last thing she had left: her dignity. If it were you, what would you have done? Watch with everyone else pretend not to see or step in. My name is Chike Okonkwo, and people like to dress me up in titles that don't mean much at sundown. Billionaire logistics magnate boss. Fine. I own trucks and warehouses, I sign checks, I sit in too many meetings where the coffee tastes like burnt rain. But none of that matters when you're staring at a girl who is shaking so hard she has to use both hands to keep her wrapper from falling. A girl who is 19 and thin in the way that tells the truth about missed meals. What matters is the line you draw and whether you stand on it when it costs you. You know what I mean. I had driven back to Abeokuta to talk to the past, to sit by my mother's grave, to walk the dusty road I used to run barefoot, to remember the boy I was before money turned life into calendars and airport lounges. I parked the SUV under the Iroko tree, paint black enough to throw back the whole sky, and I watched a marketplace freeze mid-breath. Women with bowls of yams, men with palm wine halfway to their lips, elders on benches looking anywhere but the center. In the center was Amina. I didn't know her name yet, but I recognized the way she stood, spine straight, even while everything else trembled. Her stepmother, Folake, did what bullies do, loud voice, pretty words sharpened into knives. Thief, rat, disgrace, she said, each word meant to make the girl smaller, until she disappeared. Then Folake grabbed the cloth and yanked. The gasp that rolled across the square sounded like wind moving through dry grass. The elders looked at the ground. The men went blank the way men do when they want to be present without being present. Tradition, they would say later. Family matter. Not our place, except it was. It became my place the second my hands curled and my jaw locked and my feet started moving before my brain could catch up. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't even plan to breathe. I just walked and the crowd opened like a tide parting for a rock it had not noticed until it hit it. Stop, I said, and the word cracked through the heat like thunder before rain. Pattern interrupt. Everything paused in midair. Folake's fist froze on a corner of cloth. Amina's breath came out in a sound that belonged in a clinic, not a square. Even the flies seemed to hang caught between wing beats. Folake turned on me with that practiced smile that says I've gotten away with little cruelties long enough to treat them like a hobby. "Who are you to interfere?" she asked. Already sure the answer was no one. "My name is Chike Okonkwo," I said. And then I said my parents' names because in villages, that's your true passport. I told them I left here with nothing but a stubborn streak I confused with hope, that I went to Lagos and worked until the map of the city lived in my bones, that I built something out of sweat and midnight and worry. I told them I came back to honor the dead, not to watch the living forget how to be human. She tried to throw tradition at me like a net. Family discipline, customs, the old ways. I respect every custom that protects the weak. I will not respect the kind that gives cover to humiliation. So I did what men like me are good at. I made an offer. I announced I would buy the land at the heart of the fight for 50 times its current value, cash, contracts, lawyers if needed. The chief sat up like money had just brushed his sleeve. But there was a condition. One absolute condition. I would buy only from the legal owner, not from a fraud, not from a liar, not from a murderer. I said those last 3 words quietly, so they landed where they needed to land. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. I had been in Abeokuta for a week, and I had not spent it telling old stories. I bought a second gourd of palm wine for the old men who remember everything. I paid market women for truths they already knew. I sat with a midwife who has seen more beginnings and endings than any court clerk. The picture that came together made my chest go tight. Amina's father, Adekunle, a blacksmith, with hands like anvils, and a laugh, I was told, could shake dust from rafters, dead too soon, with symptoms that sounded like a slow poison. A will, a letter entrusted to an elder gone missing in a break-in that suddenly made sense. A village that sat on its hands because sitting is easier than standing, when standing means conflict. So I called the oldest elder Babatunde by name and asked him about the letter. He stood on knees that had carried too much and admitted the truth. A sealed envelope, red wax instructions to deliver it to Amina when she turned 18. And then one night, the lock on his chest box looked scratched, and he thought nothing had been taken. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a yellowed envelope as careful as you hold a sleeping child. He broke the wax, his lips trembled, and he read a father's words. I leave my land, my savings, my tools, everything to my daughter. And if you are reading this, I am gone, and remember, you are strong, stand tall, my moon. The square did not erupt. It emptied itself of breath. How did I get the letter? Taiwo, the houseboy who took it, kept it hidden because leverage is a poor man's insurance plan. He gave it to me when I guaranteed safety and paid better than his fear could. Do you think that's fair? Paying a thief to return the truth? Or is justice sometimes built out of the pieces you actually have, not the perfect pieces you wish for? Folake went pale, recovered, and reached for another lie. She said the blacksmith changed his mind before he died. A verbal will, a witness. Her brother Tunde. Twist. I pulled a paper from my pocket and handed it to the chief, a prison record from Ibadan that put Tunde behind bars when the blacksmith died. He could not have stood by a bedside he had no legal way to reach. Power shifted in that moment, small and invisible but real as gravity. The chief's face darkened, and I watched the crowd lean forward. Someone shouted from the back about gold earrings, supposedly stolen by Amina, found under her sleeping mat. Amina stared at the ground and said no in a voice so quiet I almost missed it. You don't need to explain, I told her. I already know. I took a small recorder from my pocket and pressed play. Aduni, the carpenter's daughter and friend to Folake's girl, spoke with guilt in every syllable. She said why the earrings had been planted, when and how the village search would be staged to humiliate Amina into exile so Folake could claim the land without noise. Cruel, she called it. Brilliant, she admitted. The square went dead quiet, then loud, in the way that means something old just broke. The chief tore apart the marriage alliance his family had been building with Folakes. Ngozi, the daughter, sank to her knees, like grief had kicked them out from under her. Folake looked for a gap in the bodies around her, and found out the village had grown a spine when nobody was watching. I wasn't done. I asked Mama Yatunde, the midwife, to step forward. Her shoulders slumped with the weight of 3 years of silence. She told the truth in a voice that kept cracking. The vomiting, the dizziness, the tea Folake brewed, the symptoms she recognized from long ago as a slow poison that mimics a bad heart. She admitted Folake had threatened to call her a witch, to accuse her of stealing medicines. And if you don't know what that kind of whisper does to a woman who has delivered half the village, believe me, it can end a life without touching the body. Amina crossed the space between them and held her while she confessed. Mercy is a hard, bright thing when it shows up where you don't expect it. Then I opened a small cloth bag we had pulled from a clay pot under Folake's bed. Dried leaves, twisted roots. The midwife named them one by one, eyes going gray as old clay. Mixed right, steeped hot, the poison is tasteless, odorless, slow, and effective. Folake shouted that anyone could have planted it, that fingerprints lie, that I was framing her. Maybe. But 3 dead husbands in different towns with the same quiet ending, a stolen letter, a fake witness in prison, and forbidden herbs hidden under her roof. Sometimes the mosaic speaks for itself. That was the moment the mask split. Folake screamed that all of this was Amina's fault, that the girl had ruined her life, and then she reached into her wrapper and pulled a small knife, the quick kind used for fish. She came at Amina with murder in her eyes. Wait. Time stretched out. Then it snapped. My arm moved before my mind did. The blade caught my left forearm and opened it like a zipper, heat and sting, and a sheet of red I still see some mornings. Men from the crowd tackled her, and the knife flashed on the ground, and I sat down without meaning to, because my legs had done their job and retired without notice. Engines in the distance. The police trucks rolled in hard doors opening before they fully stopped. I had called 2 hours earlier, and the recorder in my jacket had been swallowing every word for their files. They cuffed Folake for suspicion of murder fraud theft, and the attempted murder we all just witnessed. She cursed the village, she cursed the girl, because that is what bullies do when the room stops laughing at their jokes. Yeah, that happened. Amina stood at the center of it, with her father's letter in a fist, and tears on her face and a spine that didn't know how to bend. Women came first, then men, then the elders' heads bowed, words small. Forgive us, we were afraid, we looked away, we should have done better. She did not grandstand. She nodded. She said thank you. She saved what could still be saved in that square. Mama Yatund cleaned my arm with water that smelled like mint and said 17 stitches, maybe more. Good, I told her. I need a reminder. Of what she asked, voice steady again. Of what matters, I said, and it wasn't a line, it was the only truth that rose through the noise. The long work began. Paperwork moved in the right direction. The land returned to Amina on documents that would stand up in any office with a seal and a clerk. A slice of the money Folake stole turned up in a bank account, not everything, not even half, but enough to take a breath that didn't catch in the throat. Enough to build a first room where there was only a floor. Enough is underrated. I stayed while the cut learned how to be a scar. Every morning the midwife changed the dressing and scolded me not to lift anything heavier than a conversation. Every afternoon Amina came with her quiet. At first, then less quiet than herself. We talked about Lagos and how success can be a lonely kind of noise, about her father and the forge, and how iron doesn't learn without heat, and hammer about justice, without mercy, tasting like dry bread, about mercy without justice, tasting like sugar that makes you sick. We talked like people who knew they didn't need to impress each other. I made a promise I could keep. I would build a processing facility on that land, pay fairly, take cassava and yams and turn them into products that carry value beyond the village so kids didn't have to disappear into cities that eat them. She asked for something deeper. Help me build a place where girls like me can work and learn and be safe. Not a charity, a shelter that teaches you to build your own roof. She said it to the chief like a request and a command at the same time. He said yes, because he finally understood what restitution looks like when you stop trying to buy back your own reflection. When the stitches came out, the scar ran from wrist to elbow, thick and pink, at first a little ugly, in a way that made it honest. Amina traced it with one finger and said it looked like a warrior's mark. I told her I'm no warrior. She told me warriors aren't just the people who swing a blade, they are anyone who stands between harm and the helpless. Then I asked her for something small in a world obsessed with big gestures. Permission to write to her as to visit to know her, without asking her to rush her healing into someone else's timeline. "I'm not ready for more," she said. "Not yet." "I know," I answered. "I'm asking for a chance." She gave it. Letters traveled back and forth like a river that found its bed. My handwriting neat because my mother taught me to write like I meant it, her handwriting growing stronger every week. She wrote about the cooperative she was building. 5 girls, then 10, then 20, weaving cloth dyed in indigo and gold, making jewelry from wire and beads, learning blacksmithing from a young man who treated her father's tools like relics and friends. I wrote about routes and drivers and how profit without purpose tastes like ash, about hiring managers who think people first, numbers second, knowing the numbers will catch up if you get the people right. We wrote like equals, because we were. Ngozi left the village in silence. The elders debated banishment, chose exile, which is sometimes the same thing in a different jacket. The night before she left, she stood at Amina's door with a lamp in her hand and asked for forgiveness she had not earned yet. Amina didn't lie. Maybe one day, she said, maybe not. You have a chance to become different. Do not waste it. That is mercy with a backbone. Kofi the boy, who once promised to defend her and then chose himself when fear knocked, found her by the stream and tried to explain the way cowards always try to explain. "I loved you," he said. "You loved yourself," she told him, and she did not raise her voice. "Fear betrayed me, cowardice betrayed me, you were the vessel." He left for the north. I hope he finds a way to meet his own eyes in a mirror without flinching. Do you think people change when pressure hits? Or do we just learn who we always were? 6 months later, I drove back into Abeokuta with the calendar cleared like I had stolen time from my own company. The processing facility stood on Amina's land, like a promise. The lease money flowed straight into the cooperative fund. I went there first, to the courtyard, where Amina taught 3 girls how to mix natural dyes blue up to their wrists, laughter bright as birds. She looked up and smiled in a way that did not ask permission. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would," I said, and we walked to the stream that had listened to every secret and kept them all. I told her the truth I had avoided saying in boardrooms. I wanted purpose more than a bigger fleet. I wanted to build things that matter more than I wanted to be called sir. I wanted a life I could defend when it was just me and the dark. I said I wanted to build that life with someone who knew that wealth is a tool, not a trophy. She asked if I was proposing. "Not yet," I said, "not until you say you're ready." She took my hand and traced the scar like reading a map and told me to court her properly. That word properly made me feel 19 again. 3 months later, we announced our engagement and set the wedding for the next harvest on purpose. Symmetry heals when it's done right. The village prepared like they were building a common future. The cooperative girls wove her clothes gold and crimson with patterns that told whole chapters without a single line of text. The chief worked like a man who understood the difference between a favor and a debt. The midwife cried and cooked and told anyone who asked that fear had kept her silent and she would not let it again. The day came with a clean sky and a wind that smelled like flowers and cooking fires. The Iroko tree watched like a witness who finally got to sign the right line. When Amina walked through the village, beads in her hair, clicking people lined the path and threw petals and sent up the apology their tongues didn't know how to shape. Under that tree, the elders who once sat still spoke blessings with tears, and when the question came, "Does anyone object?" there was a silence so complete it felt like a full heart. As dawn touched the horizon, we stepped aside to breathe and listen to the village laugh. "Do you ever think about her?" I asked. "Folake." Later, the court would sentence her to 25 years, evidence tying her to 3 deaths in 3 towns. Justice, people said. Sometimes Amina said, but my peace did not come from her punishment. It came from the fact that I survived her, and that I turned what she meant to break me with into shelter for others. She nodded toward the girls from the cooperative dancing with their hands up. She tried to destroy me, she said. Instead, she made me strong enough to protect them. That is a sentence I would carve into stone. Here's the part that will rub some people the wrong way. Good. The villain was not just the woman with poison and a knife. It was also the rules that hid her, the silence that fed her, the neighbors who called apathy respect. Tradition that protects bullies is not tradition. It is camouflage. If you had been under that tree, would you have shouted, "Stop," or adjusted your robe and waited for someone with more money or louder words to make the first move? Do you think that's fair to ask ordinary people to do hard things? Or is that exactly how communities stay human? I'm not preaching. I'm telling you what a scar taught me. The world doesn't need more men like me making big offers. It needs more people making small stands. A phone call 2 hours early, a recording in a pocket. A calm question asked at the right time. A hand on a shoulder, so someone telling the truth doesn't feel alone. A workplace where girls told to be invisible learn to be centered. That is how you bend a square back toward mercy. Now it's your turn. If it were you, what would you have done in that marketplace? Would you have watched, recorded, shouted, stepped in, walked away? Is silence a sin when harm is public? Do traditions deserve loyalty when they demand we abandon our conscience? Have you paid a price for stepping in or paid a heavier one for staying quiet? Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you believe. Argue with me if you need to share the moment that made you draw your own line. If this story hit something true, tap subscribe. Send it to someone who might need it today and drop your thoughts below. I'll be in the comments, reading, learning, standing with you.